Hello Booktube, welcome to the Literary Buffet. My name is Louis and today I fell a little bit into a rabbit hole. I came across a video by Pat from Book Chat with Pat on the reading rules for 2026. She herself was doing that as a response video to Alison from Alison Talks, who I think initiated these types of videos. And I also watched a few other booktubers doing response videos. So I watched Brian at the Bookish Texan and Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads and Mike at Bibliophile Bookscapes. And these were all fascinating. So the basis for these videos, or why they are all commenting on this, is apparently a list created by Ryan Holiday. So I myself had never heard of Ryan Holiday before. Apparently in the US he's famous and he's kind of like an influencer, author. He has a bookshop somewhere in Texas, I believe. So he's quite a well-known figure, at least online. And he's a stoicist, as all of the other booktubers have highlighted. I am not. But so, he put together this list of 26 of first it was 31 rules, reading rules for 2026, and then for Instagram he condensed it into a more marketable 26 reading rules for 2026. And I think from a marketing perspective it's genius. So lists in general are something that's perfect for social media. People love lists. I mean, we here on BookTube do lists all the time. We just did TBR lists for 2026, and we did top 10 or top 20 videos for 2025. So we love to watch lists, we love to create lists, and so he created a reading rules list. Now, I mean, he is an entrepreneur, he has a business, so he's marketing himself and then his business as an author, as a stoic guru or something like that. And for that I commend him. I think it's great. And obviously, if you are such a personality, an online personality, and such an philosophy influencer, you typically will create these types of lists and then kind of like pearls of wisdoms that you share with your followers. So I think from that perspective, I'm absolutely fine with him creating such a list. Of course, originally, so the first few videos when which I saw, my reaction was kind of like Greg, and then like Brian saying like, no, there are no rules for reading. And so of course there are no rules for reading. Nevertheless, I think let's go through them. I think it's a fun exercise, and just to try to dissect what Ryan Holiday might have meant by it, and what we here on BookTube might make of these rules. So I'm going actually with the shorter list, so the list that was on Instagram. I'm just reading it from Alison's video, so I will link to all of these videos below. Go check them out. They're great. So this is kind of like a response to the response to the response, so to say. If you hear some weird noises, my little French bulldog Lucky is just chilling here next to me. So let's start, and I'll have to actually take off my glasses because I'm old, and so that's what happens when you become old. First of the 26 rules for 2026. Don't just read more books, read the right books. Now, well, first of all, when you go through this list, and you will hear it, and I think Mike immediately picked up on it. Some of these lists are, some of these points are kind of like duplicates of each other, or they're a bit redundant here and there. And also some of these rules apply to different types of reading. And so this first one, don't just read more books, read the right books. I think the first reaction you could have to that is like, well, yeah, but I mean, who defines the right books? So there is no right or wrong reading. And of course, I would absolutely agree with there is no right or wrong reading. I think it's a bit typical of these philosophy influencers that they will try to promote a certain canon of philosophy books that you have to have read. So it kind of like fits with what Ryan Holiday is marketing to a certain extent. So from that perspective, I can understand it. Obviously, I would say, there's no right or wrong books. And in particular, and I think this is something that percolates throughout this whole list. This whole list is kind of like focusing on one style of reading, which is, reading to kind of like gain wisdom and, identify nuggets of insight that will help you lead a better life. And I mean, sure, that's one reason why you might read, but I think the other booktubers that I've watched, they've all pointed out, well, there's much more to reading than just that, and there are many more reasons why you might want to read, just, for joy, entertainment purposes. A very valid reason to read. I think it's probably the most valid reason to read. And so from that perspective, there's no right or wrong, list of books that you should read. So nevertheless, just to give Ryan, some credit, I do think he's right in the sense that there, and I would rephrase his whole point a little bit. I think there's value to doing some research before you read. So, not just kind of like picking willy-nilly whatever you find, in a bookshop that's kind of like displayed there on a, on the table for you to pick because it's the latest XYZ type book. But, to do some research, to think about what you might want to read within the things that you like to read. So, if you like to read mystery novels, try to find the types of mystery novels you like to read, and not just like willy-nilly the next one that you happen to kind of like blindly grab out of a shelf. So from that perspective, I think it's fine to, or I think it makes sense to do some research beforehand. And I would even say this process of, curating, doing research, thinking about what types of books you might want to read is in itself quite an enjoyable process, and something I would recommend people. But yeah, I don't think there's kind of like this predefined, I think some people spoke of gatekeeping list of books that you must read. Number 2, speed reading is a scam. You have to spend a lot of time reading. I think this kind of like baffled a lot of the other booktubers. It's also a bit baffling me. So what's this doing in this list? The way I'm trying to explain it to myself is that I would presume that the target audience of Ryan Holiday is probably young men in college, university students, or just having graduated recently. I mean, if he's a proponent of Stoicism, I mean, who are the biggest cheerleaders of Stoicism out there in the internet nowadays? Mostly young men. So, and if they're like at university, I think speed reading or skim reading might be something that is quite typical there, because I mean, you have all of your textbooks, and I mean, I can only speak for myself. When I was at university ages ago, I mean, I would of course skim through certain chapters that I thought were a bit more useless or boring and whatnot. And so Ryan Holiday is here saying like, no, you should really read everything you do in your textbook. And I'm like, if that's what he meant, I don't know. I mean, some books it's fine that you just like skim through them, especially if it's books that you read for your job, for work, for university actually, because in the end, if you have like, so if you're at university, you have an exam, you kind of like study for your exam, you read the stuff that you want to, that you need for your exam. After university, you don't have exams anymore. For your job, if you have to read certain stuff, nobody will ask you like, oh, what about like the stuff that's written on page 120? Did you remember that? Nobody cares. You read the stuff you need to read, you apply it. So from that kind of like very utilitarian perspective, I actually disagree with Ryan. I think it's absolutely fine to skim read, speed read, whatever. If you're doing it for enjoyment, nobody cares how fast you read. Nobody cares. Number 3, you should always carry a book, phone, keys, and a book. Yeah, I would agree with that actually. I didn't do it so much when I was a bit younger. I'm trying to do it more nowadays, especially when I know that I will be going to a place where I will have time to read a little bit, or I might have time to read a little bit. If there's like a commute, so my commute to work, I almost always have a book with me, so I can read during those 30 minutes or whatever that I commute. But I mean, of course, as with all of these things, I mean, if I go to the supermarket, I'm not taking a book with me. I mean, why should I? That makes no sense. But in general, I think it's a good recommendation. Then number 4, if you're not reading with a pen, you're not really reading. So no, I disagree with that. I myself never annotate. I don't see a point. I mean, it's not for me. I know a lot of people do annotate, and it's absolutely fine. If you like to do that, if it's useful for you, do it. I don't. I never, even in the past when I tried to annotate, I would never go back to it. So, you know, for me, it's a waste of my time. But also, you know, not all reading that you do is necessarily for, you know, is necessarily or necessarily needs annotation. So if you're reading like a mystery novel, you know, what are you going to annotate? Yeah, maybe you find a turn of phrase that you really like, fine. But apart from that, it makes no real sense. But I think it's, and this is again something that creeps up in several of these recommendations or rules. It's this reading as, you know, a way to, you know, dig out wisdom. It's kind of like you're sent to the content mines or the reading mines with your pickaxe, and you like, you know, go through the pages, and then, you know, you with your pickaxe you hammer here and there until you find these nuggets of wisdom. So for me, that's not what reading is about. Next one, number 5, mark your books, fold pages, beat them up. So I mean, sure. I mean, what I would say is, I think Ryan here wants to highlight that books are not these precious objects that are just, you know, supposed to be kept there and look pretty, but you should really, you know, live with them, really actually be comfortable reading them, not caring too much about how better they look afterwards. And I think this is fair. Some people, and I think some of the booktubers that have commented on it, have said that no, they actually prefer to keep their books pristine, and I think that's absolutely fine as well. I wouldn't say see this as a rule or a recommendation. For me, it's more like a permission. So it's, you have the permission to actually leave your books battered after you read them. It's fine. Nobody cares. It's your books. So then the next one. Oh, the next one is a tougher one. So number 6, forget the news. The best way to understand what's happening in the world is by reading books, usually old books. Now, there's a bit to unpack here, because forget the news. Well, I mean, yeah, fine. I mean, just like nobody forces you to read, nobody forces you to watch the news, read the news, or whatever. You don't have to care about the news at all, just as you don't have to read at all if you don't want. It's fine. You do whatever you want. Is the best way to understand what's happening in the world reading books? Well, yes and no. I think books will provide more of an understanding of what's happened. Obviously, you will write books after a certain event. So as the event is unfolding, you won't have books yet that will explain the event to you. The news that you see is obviously just kind of a continuous feed of stuff that's happening. It doesn't provide you context. It doesn't provide you background necessarily. It doesn't provide you analysis necessarily. So this idea that a book or books can help you gain a better understanding of what's happening does make sense. Now, what I would say is that if you completely ignore the news, how are you actually going to know what books you're supposed to read to explain the news? So that's where somehow this like little cryptic recommendation doesn't make a lot of sense. The last bit is also one where I would disagree somewhat with. So it says usually an old book will, you know, help you. And I wonder if that's really true, to be honest. So what does it even mean, an old book? You know, so to me, it feels like, you know, again, in his role as philosophy guru, philosophy influencer, is trying to promote this idea that the old masters, the old philosophers, have provided all the answers that you need to understand how to live in 2026. Read your Marcus Aurelius, read your whatever, Seneca, Epictetus, whoever the other Stoics are. Read your Confucius, and they will explain to you how to live the world in the world today. And I'm not really sure I agree with that, to be honest. Funnily enough, when I heard that he was a Stoic, I had to think about the review that Steve Donoghue just published a couple of days ago on the new translation of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I'll link it below because it's just a brilliant review. So he published it in his online publication, Open Letters Review, where he's the editor. And it's just brilliant. So his, as those of you who know Steve Donoghue know that he is not a philosopher. He doesn't really like philosophy. Let's put it that way. And so he's a bit sarcastic about Marcus Aurelius. I would recommend you reading that. Anyway, going to the next little rule. So number 7, don't just read books, reread books. So, I mean, sure, I think this is something that probably all of us here on BookTube would agree to. So some of us reread more often than others. I'm a little bit more hesitant when I read this, knowing the background that I've been told about who Ryan Holiday is, what he does. It sounds a little bit to me like this, again, I mean, going down to the reading minds with your pickaxe, like, oh, you only found like 80% of the nuggets of wisdom in Marcus Aurelius. Go back and reread it to find like the other 10% that you have missed so far. If that's kind of like the implication of rereading to find the last nugget of wisdom that you haven't dug out of that book so far, then I would say, like, no. If that's the purpose of rereading, don't do it. But if the purpose is rereading something that you enjoyed and you want to re-enjoy it, maybe find new facets, not necessarily facets in terms of new insights or new wisdom, but it can also just be a new appreciation for the style, for the language, for some wordplay that is happening in the book, then yes, I think these are actually more valid reasons, in my opinion, to reread a book. Then number 8, don't be a book snob, read bestsellers. Again, it's one of those kind of like little fortune cookie type recommendations that on the surface seems fine. So, I mean, yeah, of course, you shouldn't be a book snob. I would agree you shouldn't be a book snob. Read bestsellers if you want to, but I mean, when I was younger, I read the bestsellers of Dan Brown. So what was it? Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons, I think the other one was called. And I quite enjoyed them. I mean, they're fine. They're not, high literature. They won't, be canonical and whatever. But they were fine when I read them. Does it mean I need to read the newest one that Dan Brown just published 1 or 2 months ago, and that's also, I presume, a bestseller? No, I don't really feel like it. The reason why I'm a little bit hesitant again with this rule is I'm wondering what the background is for such a rule here in the context of all of these rules, and especially if you consider it with rule number 1, which was like read the right book. So if you're reading the right books, the holy list of the Stoic books or whatever it is, and then you come across another rule that says like, oh, but you should also read bestsellers. What does it really tell you? I mean, is it maybe telling you like, well, if you don't want to be perceived as a book snob, maybe read a Dan Brown here and there, so that you can talk with the peasants and be at their level somewhat, and talk with the plebeians, so that they don't think you're too much in your ivory tower. And if that's the reason why you're like supposed to read a bestseller, then I mean, of course, come on, you'll still be a book snob then. Being a book snob is not about whether you read a bestseller or not. Being a book snob is whether you look down on people that read other genres and other types of books that you do. Doesn't mean that you have to read these. I mean, nowadays I wouldn't read Dan Brown. Doesn't mean that I look down on people that do enjoy Dan Brown. I mean, it's fine. Of course, they should read stuff that they enjoy. I also don't, read philosophy books. It doesn't mean that I look down on people that do read Marcus Aurelius. So that's why I think this rule or recommendation should just be cut to don't be a book snob. Then next one, number 9, never read without taking extracts. I mean, it's kind of like the same as the annotations one. So I mean, yeah, so it's a bit repetitive here. Again, I'm kind of like reminded of, going into the content mine and digging for the next nugget of wisdom. The next two are actually kind of like the same rule. They're about DNFing books. And so rule number 10 is, if a book sucks, stop reading it. And rule number 11 is, the rule for quitting a book is 100 pages minus your age. So, I mean, rule number 10, sorry, Lucky is barking at something. Rule number 10 is, of course, fine. I think this is the recommendation that a lot of booktubers will give you. Of course, if you don't like a book, you have the permission to DNF it. You shouldn't force yourself to, torture yourself to read through something that you're not enjoying. I admit, and I think Mike also admitted, that sometimes it's hard. I think I kind of like try to struggle through a book sometimes. But yeah, I think obviously you should DNF it if you don't enjoy it. But then I think the next rule doesn't quite make sense in combination with this rule, because if it sucks, you should just like stop reading it immediately. You shouldn't kind of like continue onwards until what's the rule? Kind of like this magic formula taking, I don't know where, like 100 pages minus your age. I mean, why is it 100 pages minus your age? I mean, where does this formula come from? It makes no sense. I mean, why not take your zodiac sign, converted it into binary, multiply it by 10, subtract the whatever, the number of comets that have been seen on Earth last year, and then you get like the number of pages that you're supposed to read. This formula makes no sense. I think some of the others, I think Pat and Allison, if I remember correctly, have argued that, I mean, based on the longer blog that Ryan Holiday posted, that what's meant by this is that if you're older, you have kind of like, I'm paraphrasing, but you have less time to live, so less time to waste with, reading stuff that you're not enjoying, and so you should quit sooner. Which, I mean, yeah, I can kind of get it, but, when you're young, you should also not be wasting time doing stuff that you don't enjoy. So I think what I'm actually missing, and in this DNF discussion, and not just on this list, but also in this booktube conversation in general, is that, well, of course you should DNF when you don't feel like it, but I think not enough emphasis is put on the research that you can do beforehand to see whether you might like a book or not. So I think getting book recommendations from either your friends and then I don't know, lists that you find online or booktubers and whatnot. I think that's one part of the research. But there's also just a very simple thing that you can do, which is when you're in your bookshop or when you're on Amazon or whatever, just go to the book, pick it from the bookshelf, sit down, or if you're online, just open it in this little window thing, and just read the first few pages. Usually, especially if it's a book of fiction, just reading the first 1 or 2 pages will give you a very good indication of the style of the author and whether you like it or not. So, instead of just kind of like picking something that you're not sure whether you like it or not, just go ahead, go to Amazon. You don't have to buy it on Amazon if you're, anti-Amazon, but, just go there, read the first few pages of a book. If it's a non-fiction book, check out the table of contents. Usually that one is available also online, just to see, is this book actually covering the stuff that you want to to read in your nonfiction book that you're looking for. And then again, just read the first few pages and see whether you like the style. Because if you don't like it after 2 pages, you're unlikely to get to like it more after whatever it is, 100 pages minus your age. So that's my recommendation in terms of DNFing. So then the next one, where are we? Number 12. Good writers and good books are not hard to read. So here for this one, I'm actually tending towards agreeing with Ryan Holiday. I know a lot of the other booktubers have highlighted that you do have hard books that are that are hard to read but are still enjoyable, and then you will get a lot out of it if you put the effort into reading them. And I think the one example that was mentioned is, for instance, Ulysses by James Joyce, and that's fine. And I mean, we're talking about fiction here, and for fiction, I would agree that the style is actually part of a reason why you might or might not want to read a book. I would say, though, again, thinking about who Ryan Holiday is probably addressing this list to, which is probably younger people that might not be reading that much. I'm not sure whether I would recommend that they start with James Joyce and Ulysses. So, I mean, if they start with maybe some writers, even in fiction, that have a clearer prose, are a bit maybe, easier to digest, it's probably still a better entry point for them in fiction. For nonfiction, I would say, I would actually agree much more with Ryan Holiday even. Because for nonfiction, if you're the author of a nonfiction book, by definition, you know more than your audience, than your readers. Because why else are your readers reading your book? They're reading your book because they want to increase their knowledge about the field where you're the specialist. So the real talent in nonfiction is to actually distill the knowledge that you have, that's larger than the knowledge that your reader will have, and condense it in a way that makes it easy to digest for your reader. So Ryan is actually right for nonfiction that a good nonfiction book is actually one that's not hard to read, at least in terms of style, in terms of understanding what's being told. Now, what can make a nonfiction book hard to read is rather that it might, so at what level of knowledge it starts. So some books will be introductory books on a certain subject. So I think if I just highlight the one I'm currently reading, it's an introductory history to Poland. So this is, very basic. You're not expected to know anything about the history of Poland when you start with this. However, if you take one like this, which I read recently, The Wages of Destruction, so an economic history of the Third Reich by Adam Tooze. So Adam Tooze does write very well. So it is, from a stylistical perspective, it is easy to read and easy to follow. What makes this hard to read is Adam Tooze just expects you to already have a basic knowledge of the Second World War and of the Third Reich. He doesn't introduce stuff to you. He doesn't kind of like take you by the hand, event by event. So, Pearl Harbor just happens. It's not mentioned that it happens. You just have stuff that happens before Pearl Harbor, stuff that happens after Pearl Harbor. You're expected to know that that Germany loses the Battle of Stalingrad. You're expected to know that they don't manage to take Moscow. You're expected to know that the Nazis, the siege of Leningrad fails. All of these things are stuff that you are expected to know before you go into this. So that's something that makes that book hard to read, but it's not the style, and it's actually not the the way that Adam Tooze writes. So just give me a second here. Okay, now I lost my little list here, so that's a bit of a problem. Just give me a second. Apologies for that. Okay, so going to the next rule, if I find it here. Okay, number 13. Ask people you admire for book recommendations. I mean, yeah, sure, you should ask people for book recommendations. I disagree a little bit with this people you admire, because in general, I don't think you should admire people. I mean, I don't know, we're not in North Korea, but yeah, I mean, people you respect or people that you value the opinions of is how I formulate it. And these can be friends, these can be, people online where you appreciate the opinion of. But yeah, it does not necessarily mean people you admire. Then the next one, cool titles usually make for crappy books. So that's number 14. This is one, again, I mean, if we look at it from the nonfiction perspective, which I think is Ryan's kind of focus, I would tend to agree for a certain type of books. So if I look back to my studies, so I studied business management ages ago. You have a lot of business books that have kind of like cool titles. And Ryan is not wrong that usually those that have like these very gimmicky titles are usually pretty lightweight in terms of content and insights. So I wouldn't disagree with it. With regards to fiction, I think for that makes this rule is you can just ignore it. Then number 15, look for wisdom, don't just memorize facts. So I mean, we're back to into the mine with our pickaxe, looking for wisdom now. Look, I don't think you should necessarily look for wisdom. I mean, again, I mean, it goes back to why are you reading books? And people read books for different reasons. It can be just to, for enjoyment purposes. It can be because, I mean, for enjoyment combined with something else. You want to read about a certain culture, read about a certain time period. You want actually just to appreciate the beauty of it, because the aesthetic qualities can be something that you look for in a book, the style, etc. It can just be, I mean, a murder mystery. Why do you read a murder mystery? Of course, because you want to be, enthralled by the mystery, and then you want to try to solve it with the detective or whoever tries to solve it. So, there's many different reasons to read, and, looking for wisdom is not necessarily the primary one. I would also doubt whether, there's so many books that have like wisdom in them. I think looking for facts or looking for knowledge is perfectly fine as an aim. So, I mean, again, if I, take this introductory history of Poland by Adam Zamoyski. So I'm reading this for, as kind of like a prelude to my 2026 Poland reading project, where I'm planning to read 4 books this year, so 1 per quarter, written by a Polish author. And I thought, well, maybe first you should read about Poland in general, the history of Poland. Am I reading this, to get some wisdom from it? Not really. I mean, I could just have, gone through all the Wikipedia articles on Poland and Polish history. They would have given me the facts. So why I'm reading this? Just because it's more enjoyable than kind of like reading through some kind of like lackluster Wikipedia prose. So Zamoyski does write better than Wikipedia. The next one. Oh, it's kind of like linked to this one. So number 16, ask yourself, what do I plan to do with this information? Nothing. Again, I mean, we're back to life is not an exam. Nobody will ask you what to do with the information on the history of Poland. Just read it for fun. Number 17, in every book you read, try to find your next one in its footnotes. Now, and I understand where he's coming from, in the sense that if you want to become more specialized in a certain subject, you start with an introductory book and then you go to more specialized books. And that's fine. And I think in the past, yes, in the footnotes and then the bibliography and stuff like that would have given you pointers. you can also just, I don't know, Google it or ask ChatGPT for subject XYZ. I just read this. What can you recommend me that goes more into subject or subject XYZ? They'll also get recommendations like that. So, it's a little bit old-fashioned in my opinion as a recommendation. Number 18, when you find an author you love, read all of their books, all in capitals. So Steve Donoghue tends to say that most authors have one great book in them. Some rare authors have two great books in them. Well, most authors don't have any great books in them. Okay, fine. But, out of those that do have. So if you take that perspective, and I mean, he's a book critic, I guess he knows better than I do. You shouldn't actually read all books of an author because, well, there might be a few that are really, masterpieces and the others are kind of like so-so. And with the perspective that, well, you don't have endless time to read, is it really worthwhile doing that? I don't know. But also, like for nonfiction books, it's kind of like the same thing. You don't necessarily read nonfiction books just because the author is like fantastic and you love everything that he wrote. If I take an example, like this is another history book by John Key. I think I've shown it in some other video. This is an introductory history of India. It's excellent. So he also wrote an introductory history of China, which is also excellent. And apart from that, he read some books on, I don't know, like some totally weird stuff. So he wrote books about mountaineering, when men and mountains meet. He wrote books called Explorers Extraordinaire. He wrote The Gilgit Game. I don't know what that is. He wrote Indonesia from Sabang to Merauke. Well, that one sounds interesting. So anyway, he did write a few big books where if I look at this, kind of like page of other books by this author, some of them sound interesting. The mountaineering ones, When Men and Mountains Meet, not really. I'm not into mountaineering. Why should I read it if I'm not into mountaineering or stuff like that? I mean, so, it's kind of like these fortune cookie type recommendations where some of them make sense and some of them look like they make sense, but actually they don't. Number 19, if you see a book you want, buy it. Don't worry about the price. So this one was a bit controversial. So I think a lot of the other booktubers have answered like, well, I mean, you shouldn't just like pay any price for it. I mean, today's economy, etc. And of course, they are absolutely right. I mean, you should be mindful of your budget and of how much you can afford to spend on a book, and well, how much you can afford to spend on anything really. So this perspective of like, oh, you can spend anything on a book, just buy it and then splurge on it, is of course dependent on your budget. So I of course absolutely agree with them, and I think in general budgeting and kind of like basic financial literacy is something that anyway would be kind of like rule number 0 for anything, not just for book buying, book reading, whatever, but for being an adult, quite frankly. That aside, if we assume that that there's a framework of budget, and within that framework you can buy certain books, I actually would agree with Ryan Holiday, and I would agree with him from two perspectives. So I think on the one hand, so the first point I would make is, if you say reading is like your hobby, you should actually then also devote time to it, but also devote money for it. So the money that you kind of like within your budget allocate to your hobbies, you should actually feel free to allocate a certain amount of that budget for buying books. Especially if you think about, again, like which is the target audience, which I presume for Ryan Holiday, young men, students, or just recent graduates. What do they spend their time with? I would presume a lot of them with gaming, their PlayStation 5 or whatever number it is nowadays, the latest game. How much does a game cost nowadays? Certainly more than a book. Certainly more than 2 or 3 books. And if you buy books, secondhand, probably more than 10 or 20 books. So from that perspective, if you say, look, within your hobbies, you have gaming. For gaming, you're like absolutely willing to spend hundreds of euros. And for books, you're kind of like, if you see a book for 20 euros, you're like, ooh, that's a bit expensive. There's kind of like a mismatch on how much value you place on reading versus your other hobbies like gaming. So that's why if this point, this rule is kind of like an encouragement to feel free to spend more on, on reading and then to value it as much as your other hobbies, I would agree with it. The second point is just purely a point of, enjoyment and enjoying life. I think it's fine to sometimes treat yourself. If, treating yourself and you have the budget again, is, a nice book that you have found somewhere and that you really, really want to have, something that you think you can enjoy, for a longer time, something that you won't Marie Kondo away a year from now, or you want, put into a book unhaul video a year from now, then, again, if you can afford it, do it. And I actually did have that experience that, Ryan Holiday kind of like describes with this rule. That was ages ago when I was a student, and I was actually doing an exchange semester in Lisbon. And in the Lisbon bookshop, I randomly came across a book on architecture. Actually, this one here. So, I mean, you already know that I bought it. So, it's Sir Bannister Fletcher's A History of Architecture, the 20th edition. So, that's what it looks like. And it's fabulous. It has like lots of pictures in it. Also like lots of little diagrams. I'm not sure what you can see. And the reason I absolutely wanted to buy it is because, so I'm very interested in architecture, but typically histories of architecture that you could find then would just tell you a history of Western architecture, kind of like, Greek, temples, Parthenon, blah, 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 Roman architecture, Middle Ages, Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, Classicism, blah, 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 and then, modern architecture, all from a Western perspective. So basically 80% in Europe, and then from the 19th and 20th century onwards, you would include America, basically. And this was the first book that I came across that really would also include non-Western architecture, for instance. So here's a chapter on China. And so that's why I thought, like, oh my God, I must have it. And I have thoroughly enjoyed it for the past 20 years. For a long, long time, this was the most expensive book I owned. It has been superseded because, again, I treated myself last year to actually the 21st edition, which is now in 2 volumes, and is in color, and has even more global architecture and even more pictures of buildings. So, yeah, I splurged a little bit. But yeah, I think if you, within the framework of what you can afford, you should be able to treat yourself to a nice book, if that's what you want. And again, I mean, back to the first point, I think within your hobbies, if reading is your hobby, you should treat it, with the same care that you would treat another hobby. And if you would spend like 500 euros on a PlayStation, because you like gaming, and it's fine if you like gaming, then I think you should also be able to spend 500 euros on books if you like books. So that's my point on that one. Then number 20, don't judge a book by its cover, but also you kind of should. So here we're going into kind of like these Japanese koans where, Buddhist monks or Zen monks can ponder them for days, and what does it mean, like, judge a book by its cover but don't. Yeah, I think I kind of like get what he means, in the sense that obviously, again, from a marketing perspective nowadays, well, not just nowadays, I think it was kind of like always, books are kind of like coded, and from the book cover you can see more or less what type of genre it's supposed to be, and what type of audience it wants to attract. And literary fiction will have another type of cover than a romantasy book. So I think this is kind of like obvious, right? I don't think it's something that's it needs to be discussed. And yeah. Number 21. Oh, so this is an interesting one. Build an anti-library, a stack of unread books that humbles you. So I'm actually a big fan of having a library of books that you haven't read yet. I actually did a whole video on that, which I'll link to below, on curating your library. For me, if you look behind and kind of like all around the room here, I would say that the vast majority of books, probably over 90%, are books that I haven't read yet. And that's because I just like the process of actually researching, thinking what books I might want to read someday, kind of like building them into a library for myself. And so that's me. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this has to be your library. I kind of like had to chuckle when I saw this word anti-library, because I mean, since when is like a collection of books that you haven't read an anti-library? If you go to a public library, I would guess that the thousands of books that they have in the public library are books that you haven't read. So, a library typically is a collection of books that you haven't read, at least in the past. I think nowadays now that having books is something that has become democratized. You don't need to be an English lord somewhere in the Cotswolds to be able to have a library in your house. So each one of us has their little library, their little book collection, which we call a library. But it's not an anti-library for me, at least. The one bit I would disagree with is like the last bit that says it's a stack of unread books that humbles you. It shouldn't humble you. You should actually rejoice in having them. I mean, each unread book that I look into is for me like something that I'm looking forward to read. So all that, everything that you have in your library shouldn't be humbling you and making you dread. You should actually look forward to each and every book that you have physically bought and spent money on acquiring. So that's that on the entire library. Then number 22, read books and writers you disagree with. I mean, sure, fine. And I think all the other booktubers have said, like, well, of course you should read also stuff that you disagree with. I think, again, I mean, you read whatever you want. You don't have to go out of your way to read something that you disagree with, just to have read something you disagree with. It's like, I mean, I'm pretty sure that I would disagree with, I don't know, let's say Marx's Communist Manifesto. I don't want to read it. I will never read it. I don't own it. I don't plan to own it. Do I have to read it just because I will disagree with it and it will change my thinking? Not really. I mean, I can just read books about communism for that. I mean, same thing, on the other side, I'm certain to disagree with Adolf Hitler and Mein Kampf. I will not buy Mein Kampf. I will not read Mein Kampf. I don't need to read Mein Kampf to know that I will disagree with it. Number 23, don't be satisfied just getting the gist of things. So this is, again, one of those, fortune cookie type of statements. I think in Pat's version, or it was stated that this is one of those that is also like attributed to Marcus Aurelius. And yeah, I'm not sure that that I really agree with this one. The times of Marcus Aurelius, where as a Roman emperor you could get into the deep end, and then didn't need to be satisfied with just getting the gist of it. They're long gone. I guess like the last time when you would have like a universal scholar that would know everything that was known at their times was probably the Renaissance with Leonardo da Vinci and those types of scholars. And nowadays it's impossible to know everything. So by definition, you will have things that where you only know the gist of. So I mean, if I think of, I don't know, quantum physics, even just to get the gist of quantum physics is like a daunting endeavor. So I mean, getting to know more than the gist of quantum physics is something where you would study and research your whole life. So, you know, I'm not really sure I agree with it. I think for a lot of things it's fine to just know the gist of it. Number 24. Prefaces and forwards are there for a reason, don't skip them. I disagree. I think you can skip them. I usually do. I think sometimes they're useful if you're like, if I think about, for instance, the Mahabharata, so the ancient Indian epic. The introduction was actually very helpful because I knew nothing about ancient Indian culture, knew nothing about, you know, the Hinduism, the gods, the structure of the society. The version I read, so the Penguin Classic version, is an abridgment. So it was good to actually just get the gist of the gist of the story beforehand, so that once I actually read the abridged version, I would understand it. But for other books, and I would say most other books, it's not necessary. And I think someone else highlighted that usually they do contain spoilers. So if that's something you mind, then it's better not to read them. I've noticed that in Germany, often you don't have them as forwards, but you have them as afterwards. And I think that makes more sense, because then first you are confronted with the work in itself. I mean, if it's not like the Mahabharata, but, you know, like a more, you know, an easier work. And, you know, after reading it, then you can go into like an interpretation of it. I think that's a much better way to handle this. In terms of non-fiction books, because I mean, again, this list is probably more focused on non-fiction. I usually skip the prefaces and forwards. Usually, I think these are more like summaries of all the work that's to come, and I'm like, I've often felt that it's a waste of time to read them. If I'm there to read, I don't know, work again, like the history of Poland. I mean, what preface do I need? I just want to dig into the history of Poland. Number 25, if a book is really good, recommend it and pass it along. Yeah, of course. And number 26, find great stuff and suck everything you can out of it. So I think the find great stuff, of course, makes sense. I mean, who would disagree with that? I would even, like, again, to my earlier point, say, even like the process of finding and searching for great stuff, whatever that is. I mean, not just works of literature, but also arts, and then, you know, whatever else you like, you know, places to go hiking, travel spots, architecture, as I mentioned. So yeah, do search for great stuff, and find great stuff. It's the second part that I'm kind of like a little bit disagreeing with. Like, suck everything you can out of it. I mean, again, we're like back into this content mine where we're just like looking for whatever these pearls of wisdom that can help you lead a better life. I don't know. I disagree with that. I mean, if you go to, I don't know, go to a museum, look at a painting by Van Gogh. So, you know, if you're supposed to suck everything you can out of it, I mean, what does that mean? Are you supposed to go there for like a whole week, and every day you just stand there for like, from the opening of the museum to its closure, and you just look at that painting to absorb it fully? Is that what you're supposed to do? Is that what anybody does? No. So I think what's missing here, and what's kind of like missing through this whole list, is just this idea of doing something just because out of appreciation, you can just find great stuff, look at it, read it, listen to it if it's music, and just appreciate the beauty of it. And that's it. You don't have to take wisdom from it. You don't have to take information from it. Symphony by Rachmaninoff doesn't need to, make you into a better person. You can just listen to it and enjoy it. And so that's where I would leave it. Just if you want to take any of these rules, I actually skip all of them and just follow one, which is like read to enjoy. So that's it from my side. I can put my glasses back on so I don't have to read the rules anymore. Thanks a lot. Been a bit rambling, it seems, so sorry for that. But if you've stayed until the end, thank you very much. Have a good day. Cheers.